Thank you, Madam Speaker, and it's a privilege to rise for the third time today. It seems like I was just on my feet here. It's great to be here. I will take the opportunity because I did ask the question originally of the Minister of Transportation and International Trade to wish her well in her new role. I might also tell the parliamentary secretaries on the other side to maybe get their resumes ready, as I hear that there may be some other shuffling going on in the cabinet. But as we go forward into this question, it was one of the major questions actually in the election, and the Prime Minister made a very large, grandiose promise, and it turned out into a bait and switch type of situation. He said to Canadians, "We will eliminate all interprovincial trade barriers by Canada Day." Sounded like a great promise. Probably won him some votes, if I'm guessing. The reality is that that was never possible. And it's been proven, and this is one of the many promises this government has already broken in less than 6 months. They said that they would cut spending. We're likely going to have the largest deficit perhaps ever in Canadian history, excluding wartime and pandemic eras. They said that they were going to tackle crime, yet we see crime continuing to rise. They said that the economy would grow the fastest in the G7. Turns out it's actually growing the slowest. And so we've got a series of these broken promises. But getting to the specific promise, free trade in Canada by Canada Day, they also told us that it would contribute $200 billion in economic benefits. The reality is, a bare, tiny bit of those interprovincial trade barriers have been removed. They are the federal trade barriers, which represent a minuscule portion of the actual barriers. There are still barriers to have direct-to-consumer alcohol being sold. There are still many barriers for professionals or tradespeople to work in the various provinces across our country. There are still many barriers for transportation. There are different rules for different roads across this country. There are many different regulations across this country for the manufacture and distribution of safety devices. Quite frankly, in order to have a toilet on a construction site in Ontario, you need a different set of regimes, a different toilet than you do in Manitoba. Does that make any sense, I ask you, Madam Speaker? These trade barriers still very much exist. They are still very much real. I will give the parliamentary secretary an opportunity to respond, but I want to lay out my question. I'm hopeful. I know that these notes are often prepared by the PMO, but perhaps he can show his freedom as the independent, intelligent member I know he is, and respond to my question, which is this. It's a very simple, concrete, tangible question. How much economic benefit have we realized from the minuscule, tiny reduction in interprovincial trade barriers?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I will answer that question in detail. Madam Speaker, every year, internal barriers to trade and labour mobility cost our country, yes, nearly $200 billion each year. And that is a staggering figure for people here and at home. Represents lost opportunities, lost investments, lost growth. Now imagine, Madam Speaker, what we could do with that $200 billion. Stronger communities, thriving communities, and better paying jobs for Canadians. And that's not just an economic stat. It's really a call to action for people in here and in the country. You know, that's why, Madam Speaker, our government made a clear commitment to remove the barriers, unnecessary trade barriers, and build a strong and more unified Canada from coast to coast. And we are keeping that promise, Madam Speaker. In June, we passed the Free Trade and Labour Mobility in Canada Act and eliminated all federal exceptions in the Canadian Free Trade Agreement. With that, Madam Speaker, we sent a clear message. Canada is open for business, not just globally, but internally as well. Now, we heard from businesses and workers across the country, and their message was very crystal clear. Stop duplicating rules, reduce red tape, and make trade within Canada easier. Now, Madam Speaker, this government leads by example. Where federal regulations stand in the way of free movement, where they overlap with provincial rules or impose unnecessary burdens, we are removing them. We are committed to doing our part. And if something is good enough in one province or territory, it does not require additional federal red tape. That's fairness, that's common sense, and that's true leadership. Now, we are fast-tracking the regulatory process, and over the summer, We consulted with business, workers, territories, provinces, and everyday Canadians. And their voices are reflected in how we'll implement this new legislation. And we're not working alone, Madam Speaker. At their June 2025 meeting, the Prime Minister and the Premiers committed to concrete actions to build one Canadian economy. Now, together with the provinces and territories through the Committee on Internal Trade, we're doing the following. Number one, finalizing a mutual recognition agreement on consumer goods to be in place by December. Number two, expanding mutual recognition in the trucking sector to align regulations and reduce transportation costs. And three, implementing a 30-day service standard for recognizing professional credentials across the provinces so Canadians can move, work, and succeed wherever opportunity calls. Now, Madam Speaker, these are not just bureaucratic changes. They are real reforms that will unleash Canadians' potential. They will allow our businesses to grow, our workers to move freely, and our economy to operate in one united, efficient, and resilient market. Because no one, and I think everyone agrees here, no one should be penalized for doing business across provincial lines. And no Canadian should be held back by arbitrary rules when seeking opportunity elsewhere in their own country. Further, the government has brought together industry, premiers, provincial governments, and labour to coordinate on areas where we can cut red tape and increase trade and support Canadian businesses, Madam Speaker. This has included, most recently, a trucking hackathon aimed at reducing barriers in the trucking industry, as well as a summit focused on supporting Canadian steel and shipbuilding industries in building new vessels here in Canada. That's the vision, Madam Speaker, of a modern Canada, united not just in spirit, but in practice. And Madam Speaker, we are building the kind of economic future that Canadians deserve, one without internal walls, one with shared prosperity, and one where every Canadian has the freedom to work, thrive, and trade. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Northumberland Clark.
As I said, those are wonderful words, and you know, if they were said in the election, they might have even been deserved of some support. But that's not what the Prime Minister promised. He looked Canadians in the eyes, and he lied. He misspoke the truth. But he misled. Oh, yeah, misled Canadians. How's that? He misled Canadians. He misled Canadians to believe that he would be able to eliminate all interprovincial trade barriers by Canada Day, and that has not happened. And by the parliamentary secretary's own acknowledgement, that has not happened. That's a classic bait and switch. And so instead of having interprovincial trade barriers eliminated, they're now peddling a plan to eliminate interprovincial trade barriers. Those are two very different things. And to say that we're going to eliminate the trade barriers and simply deliver a plan to eliminate the trade barriers in the future with no hard deadlines.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I think we can all agree Canadians are putting in the work. They're building businesses and supporting their families, and they're contributing to their communities. And the least we can do is get out of the way, cut the red tape, become more lean in our regulatory processes. And I guess I'll leave this. Improving internal trade isn't just a policy goal. It isn't esoteric. It's a practical and pragmatic step in improving the lives of Canadians. That's what we're doing. We saw that in June with substantial legislation that was passed. We're seeing that with collaborations with each premier and territorial leader of this country. That speaks volumes. Canadians are ready to be bold and ambitious, and we're going to be there with them.